Trust you had a quick rest. So basically, we're going to continue with Agile. Agile value-driven delivery. We're talking about delivering value as you are doing Agile, not just building a feature or releasing something, but ensuring that whatever you're doing is valuable, which is a very, very important part of what we are doing in our process, in our system. So delivering value is key, is essential, it is very, very paramount as we run through agile projects and agile systems. Like I said earlier, projects exist to create business value, and the project manager's goal is to increase value and to reduce risks as early as possible so that your project is successful, as you undertake the project. Now, projects undertaking to generate business value, basically trying to produce profit, you're trying to, the value could be maybe producing profit, you're looking at improving service delivery, maybe meeting a market demand, complying to safety rules, just like recently the CBN said, all new accounts should have a maximum payout of 20,000 for the first 24 hours. Then subsequently you can then decide to increase it, right? You should also create an opt-in and opt-out feature for your customers so that they can decide if they want to opt out of NIP or opt into NIP as they please. And alongside other things that of course, when you change from one device to another, your limit is also brought down to 20K for the first 24 hours and all that. These are reasons why projects can be undertaken, as well as regulatory compliance. These are areas of value that could necessitate, carrying out the project. Now, how do you then assess this value? There are different ways you can assess value. I've forgotten the word they call it in economics. I think I'll remember as we go. More like appraisal techniques. Yeah, that's the word. Appraisal techniques that helps you to know whether whatever this stuff I want to do now, is it valuable or it is not valuable. So there are different appraisal techniques. One of them is return on investment. So you're trying to measure the ratio of the benefits received from the investment of money that you've put in. It's usually a percentage, right? So you're assessing the value. Another one is internal rate of return. The interest rate you will need to get in today's money to receive a certain amount of money in the future. They are basically computations that you can use to calculate some of these assessment values. Though it may not necessarily be what you will feature in your exams, but you just need to have an idea of what they are. Net present value or present value, the value of future money in today's term. How do you basically, we know that in the future there will be inflation. What that calculation tries to help you do is to understand how that money will be valued now in the future. So there's a rate, I think it's 1 plus R is the power something, each of the power time and all that. It helps you to calculate it and know that. End value management, the formula that monitor the value of the project, as it is progressing. The end value meaning as you're doing the project, if you're getting value, right? End value management. That's basically what it talks about. Then we have key performance indicators, which basically talks about key things that you are looking out for to help you to tell you that at least you're making progress, and um, you're doing well. So there are metrics basically that matter to the team to be sure that okay, we are using it. So you're measuring your progress as you go. The key things you want to measure: rate of progress, how much points have been completed, the remaining work, how much work is yet to be done from the from the you know from the backlog, and then when is it likely going? Are they likely to complete it? And then what is the amount that will be needed in terms of cost to complete the remaining things that we need to complete as well. Then we have customer valued prioritization. We're looking at things that gives the highest value to the customer first. We're not building things for ourselves. We're listening to the market and we are building something that will give the highest value to the customers first, right? And the product owner is the one that is responsible for keeping the items in the backlog in a prioritized way. When changes are added to the backlog, it's important that the product owner prioritizes those changes, and the customer is the person who will then declare what the success will look like at the end of the day when you finish, building a particular feature from your backlog. And then the team will then discuss with the customer, at the end of each of the iteration, and the priority of the remaining work item. Then value-based prioritization is one of the core practices in Agile planning. And then we now have features are prioritized based on the business value, the risks, and the dependencies of that feature. Now we now have what we call MVP, which I think I listened to Lions once, and the person there was asking the guy that came to pitch his product that what is an MVP. And unfortunately the guy couldn't answer, but he was building a software, which wasn't so fantastic, and that was the end of the pitch. So it's a good thing we're here. MVP is called minimal viable product, or people call it minimum viable product. Basically, what are the key set of functionalities that when you're done with those ones first, it is enough for you to push it into the market so that customers can use it while you then begin to bring the other one. So bare bones, essentials of a product, right? That's what a minimum viable product talks about. The set of functionality that is complete enough to be useful, but small enough not to represent the entire project. Example, you're building a mobile application. You can start with payment, ability to send money and receive. That could be your MVP. And then maybe you now add cards, and then maybe you now add loans, and then maybe you now add bill payment and all that. So your MVP can be, and then you define your MVP, and then you go ahead of it. So considerations for requirement prioritization. So again, what do you need to check? The first thing is value, like we said. What is the benefit of this thing we want to prioritize to the business? The next one is cost. Um, the expense, what is going to cost us to do it versus the return on investment if we actually undertake this. The next one is risks, the riskiest requirements first. Which requirement is most risky? And then you then pick it from there. Then this difficulty in implementation. You want to check this thing you want to do, how difficult is it to implement? The rule of thumb is start with the safest one first. And then success factor. What is the probability that this thing we're going to do is going to succeed? You want to work with the ones that have the highest probability of success first. Then we have regulatory compliance, of course, laws and regulation. What you want to do, you want to ensure that it's in tandem with the laws of the land, and then relationship with other requirements. So it might be linked to other businesses or that call different things, just like, okay, you want to do a card feature now, we have to talk to Verve, talk to MasterCard, Afrigo. These are other requirements, right? The stakeholder agreement, consensus, are we all in line, or are we all aligned that this is what we're going to be doing? And then urgency, how urgent is this feature? How time sensitive is this requirement, and all that. Then we have Little's law. Little's law talks about the duration of a queue, how the duration of a queue is provided to its size. So basically, what Little's law help you to do is to limit work in progress. There's a formula for it. I think it's Lambda. I'll send it to the group. Basically, helps you to calculate work in progress, time to take to complete it, and all that. So when you have those data, you are able to then manage it. So you need to know work in progress, how many people will need it more, and what is the time. So if I increase the number of persons, maybe my time will reduce. I mean, my work in progress will reduce. So you now calculate, you now do your mathematics, and you're now able to know, which of the variables that you can permutate, and then you are able to then move faster, right? Um, so the lead time of a process is equal to the amount of work in progress divided by the average time it takes to complete each piece of the work. So the lead time is equal to work in progress divided by average time it takes to complete each piece of the project. So you can then vary. If you can vary any of the parameters, and then you'll be able to know how to see how to improve your process. Then we have agile contracting. Remember, one of the key things in the Agile Manifesto talks about customer collaboration, over contract negotiation. So many failures, stem from breakdowns in the customer supplier relationship. So projects as you go ahead, incurs risks. And when those involved in the contract take the perspective of, okay, you are the winner, me, I'm the loser, and that's how the contract is done. However, a collaborative approach is the most preferred in Agile, where you're trying to pursue a shared risk reward system, right? Or relationship where everybody wins. Some contracting techniques that can formalize these dynamics, basically, that will help you do this. And we have very, very important. So you want to ensure that whatever contract you're developing in your agile system, you are trying to make it such that it is open to, okay, we can talk about this. We're not, I don't want to do it in such a way that the other person feels like he's losing and I'm winning. No, everybody is happy in the job. There's a win-win for everybody. Please, there's a compromise at every point in time, and everybody's happy, doing the work. Then agile is uncertain. Contracts are legal documents, and the contracts want certainty. um, Define project approach, nature of agile to change. So key things you need to see. We know that agile system generally there's uncertainty, and then when we talk about contracts, we are trying to um, do something that is certain, so everybody can always look at it. And but then we need to define a good approach, and then understand the nature of agile system to change, and then when we are now typically putting these contracts, we are now looking at balancing all this change in terms of scope, time, cost, and all that, and ensuring that it is well catered for, even as we do agile contracting. Now, the buyer and seller can make an agreement that they want, right? And procurement is always tricky with agile contract. The reason is because we want to start now and then things can just change, and all that. So we need to create a system where it allows the system to be somewhat flexible. Um, so in Agile, there's a concept of verifying and validating value. Where we talk about the gulf of evaluation. When there's something that is very common on social media, where you tell one person something and tell the person to repeat, and the next person repeats, and by the time you get to the last person, what was communicated becomes misunderstood. When we talk about the gulf of evaluation, we're talking about the difference between what is said and what is understood. Um, the gulf is made, so that gulf is just a space between what is said and what is understood. And intangible projects often experience this gulf. So intangible project talks about projects that not necessarily touch, right? So these are images that show you this gulf of evaluation. So you have how the customer explained it. This is what they want. You can see they have 4 flags with the boat, you know, and how you're supposed to move out and all that. And then birds, 3 birds, and as you can see. However, how the Scrum Master understood it is that there are no flags, just paddles, right? You paddle it, then there's still bed. And when the developers, how they built it, oh, they now built one flag, put fans inside, put a propeller to propel the ship, and all that. And then finally, what the customer really, 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 really needed is just as simple, as this. So that golf basically talks about the difference between what is and what was understood. And to avoid this, we need to understand, probably do prototypes so that you can really get what the customer is saying, and then show them they are able to communicate, we are able to understand each other, before we even commence development. Even the developers can also see it and understand. That gap is removed or is taken away. Now, frequent verification and validation. So to resolve the problem as soon as possible, don't let little problems grow over time, right? So feedback loop is very important. When you release, you iterate, you plan, you acceptance test, you then do your stand-up meeting, your pair negotiation, unit test, pair programming, code, and you keep doing that. So you plan, you test, you bring out, you plan, you test. Any problem you see, you try to sort it out immediately so that you don't allow it to, grow so big, over time, right? And then finally, we're just going to talk about stakeholders in Agile. Um, Basically, it's going to be the last, module we're going to talk about today before we wrap it up. Stakeholders. in Agile.